Yo, so I read that Quincy thing.
That Quincy Jones interview where he says that Marlon Brando fucked Richard Pryor.
And, yeah, James Baldwin.
James Baldwin threw me for a loop. Like, that's wild.
Yo, I know. It's things where it's like, yo, these are black men who are, like, known for being black men and, like, part of the stereotype and, like, all this other stuff. But just, like, feel homophobia and black male pride and, like, knowing that they got fucked by a white boy.
And it was also that whole idea of just, like, when there's cocaine and Quaaludes, you'll fuck anything.
Well, first of all, that's very true. And then second of all... What's up, bros?
What up, bros?
And welcome to Bruh Meets World.
When it's Boy Meets World.
Your Boy Meets World fan cast. I'm Ceej.
And I'm Tony Curtis.
All right. Tony Curtis, what you up to, boy?
Well, I just saw this episode and I have lots to discuss. Mostly about, like, criminality and law. And yes. Okay, we're on the same page there.
Yeah, we're on the same page. Dude, remember. All right, so for those who don't know, and I kind of hinted at this in the last episode, I had just finished the new Jim Crow, which is a book that you should all read if you haven't yet. And to finish that book and then see an episode like this has...
It gets you hot.
So, like, yeah, I have so many comments and from so many different directions, so I'm really, really excited to discuss this. And just so everyone knows, this episode is called The Fugitive. It's episode 17 of season 1. And the tell me about it is that Shawn breaks the law and Cory helps him, which I don't like. I have... Yeah.
No, because this sentence implies that Cory helps him break the law, right?
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. That's very misleading, and I don't think it's... Yeah. But again, the reason why I even wrote this down is because it has a lot to do with how we speak about crime. And one of the biggest takeaways that you can get from reading the new Jim Crow is how we discuss and talk and think about crime in this country, specifically around this time.
Oh, this is the 90s, man. I when I was watching this, I was like, oh, but what about 3 strikes? Like, there was just so many things that I had to... let's just jump in. I have so much.
Which, by the way, just before we do that, do you know how 3 strikes works? So, like, I always thought 3 strikes was like you do a crime, 3 times or whatever, you are sent to jail, which is bad in itself. But how 3 strikes works is they get to decide how those strikes work. So, for example, if you had robbed a store, like after hours, I don't know, and you technically broke 2 crimes. So like the burglary is one, and then like trespassing is another one. They can do 2 of those as a strike, and then if you miss your parole violation, that's 3 strikes.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's like, are you kidding me?
I know this doesn't seem relevant, guys, but I promise it is.
Oh no, it's all relevant. Like,
yeah.
All right, so let's get into it. As you said, opening scene, we're in the Matthews house, and Alan comes home from the pouring rain, and Cory is trying to smooth talk his way outside, but Alan's not having it. He's like, yo, play inside, let's do something. And Cory, of course, complains about his suburban lifestyle and how it's too boring. And as he does that, in his room, thunder claps, and there's Shawn, who's soaking wet, and
in the shadows, hiding in the shadows. All the lights are off in this room.
Yeah, which it also kind of signifies, again, how we think of criminality. Because the next thing that Shawn says is, the cops are after me, maybe the FBI, you're not involved unless you want to be. And then Cory, who just was complaining about how boring his life is like, I'm in.
Yeah, because to Cory, crime is fun and games.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to talk about, because this episode to me is a lot about who gets to be a child and who gets to like navigate this road. But
sure, yeah. And I will say this about this episode: it wastes no time. Like this isn't one of those. Like I know in the last few episodes, it started about one thing and pivoted midway. This jumps right into it. There's no B or C storyline. This is the whole episode.
Exactly. So that's episode. That's our opening scene, and then we have the theme song.
Skip.
All right. And wait, did you skip or did you watch?
No, I watched the theme song. I'm just, again, it's driving me slowly insane.
Yeah.
Like I like it's fun to watch it while I'm like pinching myself, like because it takes the pain away, you know.
But so yeah, let's the next scene after the credits is where we get a little bit of definition of like what Shawn's talking about. He explains, first of all, that he climbed through Cory's window. That's how he got in. And I was like, I feel like that's something that we should be concerned about. I mean, like,
bruh, it's the 90s. Every kid had other kids climbing through their windows. Clarissa, Dawson. It was just a thing kids did.
But like the fact that someone can climb through your window again seems problematic. Like it's your friend this time, but
did he get there through the treehouse? I wonder.
No, possibly. He just said he climbed the tree.
All right. Yeah.
All right. But anyway, he then tells the story of the cherry bomb, which is that he's trying to tell the story of the cherry bomb, and Cory keeps interrupting because he's so excited.
Yeah, well, Shawn is, when he starts talking about this cherry, there's been a few times this season where Shawn's just been like a little like psycho, or like where he's like messing with Minkus's food, or like I don't know, where he's just like, I can't help but to be bad. Like there's this like instinct in me to do something that's bad. And here he's like, yeah, dude, I had this cherry bomb in my pocket. It was like screaming, light me, Shawn, light me. What? You're 12. Why do you have these instincts?
Well, first of all, I don't think that's fair, because I think that, like, at least to call it psycho, because in anything, I think he's just deviant. There's lots of kids who, the idea of like doing something risky or troubling is fun and exciting, and that calls out to him. I love the little monologue where he was like, now's the time to do it. And
here's the thing that makes me think he's like, it's something he can't almost control, is that he goes on to go say, I don't even remember lighting it. It's just in my hand lit at this point.
Well, I think it's the adrenaline, and it also shows how short-sighted it is, because I love how he's like, it's lit. I didn't even know how it got lit. It's in my hand, and then after it's in his hand is when he realizes, oh yeah, I could lose an arm. This is dangerous.
You'll look like the shop teacher is what Cory says.
Yeah, exactly. He realizes this, and then he, again, what he tries to do, and he's really thoughtful about it. He's like, yo, I can't throw it out. There are people around. Someone could get hurt.
Yeah, I thought that was a really good point, where he was like, I didn't want to hurt any people. This is the reason why I did this. And it makes you understand that, again, this isn't a malicious kid. This is just a kid who wanted to like light a cherry bomb just for the fun of it. Like he wasn't trying to do anything more than that.
Which, on top of which, can we just talk about the fact that cherry bombs were something that was marketed to kids?
Oh, dude, there was candy cigarettes in the 90s. I mean, what?
I'm just saying, it's one of those things to where we do these things where it's like there's cherry bombs, there's candy cigarettes, and then when a kid decides to
like realistic looking guns for kids to play with in the 90s, remember that? Like black guns?
Yeah, exactly. And then when a kid picks up a cigarette in real life or wants to have a gun, all of a sudden that kid's the insane one. That is troubled and we need to look after. So I don't know. It's just
it's society. Yeah. Oh, bruh, we're getting into this.
So anyway, he has a cherry bomb and he threw it into a mailbox so it wouldn't harm anyone. The mailbox outside of Alan's store, which I like that Cory is excited by, but then the moment he realizes that it's his dad's store, he all of a sudden has mixed feelings, which is very white America.
Yeah, because he's like, am I okay with this? But it's almost this point of like, it seems like he is.
Yeah. But again, it was like, to me, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, this is so cool. Oh, wait, I could be affected by this? No, I don't know. Yeah. All of a sudden, I have mixed feelings.
Totally.
Yeah, so anyway, Shawn's like, he knows that he's crossed the line this time, which there's a lot of mention of the line, which I want to get into.
100%.
And
because they talk about throughout the entire episode of going from one side of the line to the other side and how you get from one side to the other. It's really telling of their perception of the legal system.
Exactly. And he says that he can't go home. And Cory's like, yo, like, you didn't do it on purpose. What would be the big deal? And Shawn, like most kids do, he fears that, like, his father won't even hear that. His father will try to kill him if he even tries to go home, because this time it was a really big deal.
Well, I will say this about this episode is that a lot of times the lesson is hidden, and it's something that maybe you don't even get into like Feeney's last line of the episode. This one tells you right off the bat what this lesson is. Cory says, Shawn says, I can't go home, and Cory's like, why not? And that's the entire episode of at what point is it too bad where you can't go home and you can always come home? Like, that's the theme of it. That's the lesson. We get it right away. But even though we hear it right away, it doesn't take away from the effectiveness of it.
Yeah, well, honestly, so I have... I got a different, or I want to take away a different lesson from this episode, because to me, you mentioned it, what Feeney says at the end is the better lesson than the one that we're getting about crime and responsibility and all this other stuff. Accountability, yeah. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, as we usually do. So at this point in time, Shawn asks if he could stay with Cory, and Cory's like, I just got to go ask my parents. And then this is the point where Shawn's like, yo, okay, you're clearly new at hiding this. And this, fits with all we already know about Cory, which is that he is a class clown of sorts, but in reality, he's a goody two-shoes.
Yeah, he's such a Boy Scout. Like, I don't understand how he's so seduced by getting into trouble, because it seems as though he's so uncomfortable by trouble.
That is a very good point. It's like Cory's one of those people who loves being near the action, but when you put him near the action, he's like, "Oh my god!"
Like, yeah, he's freaking out the entire episode. It seems like he's miserable by it. Like, it's not a fun time
that he's miserable by it. But again, I think for him, it mixes up the monotony. So.
Well, this is his learn. He learned that, you know what, trouble ain't for him.
This is a lesson that I don't think Cory learned, because we know for a fact that Cory jumps right back into trouble very frequently.
Yeah, some of these lessons he doesn't take to us as easily.
Exactly. But this is actually the beginning of a dynamic between Cory and Shawn, because earlier in the season, we saw Cory be the one who took the test and cheated, like when Shawn was the one who was kind of the voice of reason. We're now starting to get into this stereotype, and they've been hinting at it for a while, of Shawn having like this troubled home life and Cory being the go-to friend who has his life together, but is still learning how to deal with Shawn's limitations.
Well, that's what I was going to say is probably the biggest takeaway from this episode. If nothing else, we have now established Shawn's character as a troublemaker. And this is something that carries on throughout the rest of the series. This is such an ingrained part of his character. Yep. And up until this point, like you said, it's subtly mentioned, but nothing even close to something like this. If anything, like you said, Cory's gotten more trouble than Shawn so far.
Exactly.
But from this point on, this is who he is this kid who's constantly like, what side of the line am I on?
Exactly. And we can discuss on why they did that, but
this was a choice to do this to Shawn's character.
Correct. And again, I think I don't know if this was at least initially where they saw this going. I think that they hinted, or that they built up little things slowly, and with
little things, mob connections to horse races, little things.
Well, I was gonna say trailer park, dad job, but I think it's like those they put those things in his character, and then they felt like this was the most logical next step.
I do have to say that there is something about having a character like Shawn on a show like this, where you typically only, like on Saved by the Bell, everyone is middle class, everyone has a good family life. With Shawn, his dad is never around. He's bouncing around from house to house. He doesn't have a stable home life, and he's growing up around people who are seduced by crime. And as you know, a person of color in the '90s, you understand like when you grow up in an environment where other people are easily seduced by crime, it's hard for you not to be. And so it does make it his character sympathetic to that demographic, I would say.
No, I think it's one of those things where it's like Shawn is very important and integral to the Boy Meets World universe. It's
the Boy Meets World.
Yeah, the Boy Meets World. Shawn's viewpoint is definitely needed, and I think it's one of the things that makes the show exceptional in the fact that, as you said, it doesn't always show Cory's middle class lifestyle, or it doesn't always show that that's what everyone has and that's the standard. It really does dive into the different routes other people's lives have taken.
Sure. Other than actually like Roseanne, I don't know that we saw like this blatant like working class, borderline lower class on television, like
as a regular character, because you always had that special episode where someone found out that their friend was in a gang, or
Zach finds a homeless girl at the mall. Yeah.
You know, we've been watching Zach Morris's trash after that, but like, it's Boy Meets World is good for that. I'm just saying that when I rewatch it, I'm learning, or I'm seeing kind of its 90s shortcomings and the way that it helped tell this narrative that I don't really think was healthy.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think that's what that may have been the result. I don't think that's what they were trying to do.
No, not at all. I'm not saying that it was intentional. I'm saying, like I said, it's a 90s shortcoming. It's the same thing with the misogyny. It's like, they were of their time, but it helped
perpetuate it.
Yeah.
Well, I think the what they attempted to do was to introduce Cory to people who had different worldviews than him.
Yes.
So you have Topanga, who's this like weird hippie, and you have Shawn, who's like this lower class criminal, and you have Minkus, who's like this like upper class, I want to say, like well educated guy, and they're constantly throwing new ideas at Cory that he's unfamiliar with from all these different angles, and Cory has to figure out how he wants to, what he wants to take and what he wants to, leave behind. It's a really interesting idea for a kids show. But like you said, with this episode, I don't know that it was always well done.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's let's just continue. Okay, so at the time they go, Shawn is like, look, no one can know that I'm here, and Cory points out, and he's like, Eric's not the brightest bulb, but he'll notice another guy in the room, and then that's when Shawn just kind of says that I only mention this because it's a nice little comedic beat. He's like, I'll hide in the closet. And Cory's like, have you seen my closet? And then he goes, all right, under the bed. And Cory's like, you can do that, but you may not be the only living thing under there. And then that's when Shawn does a great little bit of comedic timing where he lifts the bed and he's like, hi there. And it's just like, it's fun. And I like it when they're able to balance a really serious moment with like a comedic chop.
Well, and both of the kids are really showing their skills as both dramatic actors and comedians, because there are points where Cory is hilarious in this episode.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But this is when Cory is like, look, I'm going to go downstairs. I'll keep it cool. Don't worry about it. And he brags about being an accomplice. And he's like, you just remember, I'm your accomplice. I'm
accomplice boy.
And you're like, all right, so you clearly don't know what accomplice means, or you have a vague idea, and you also definitely don't understand what comes with being an accomplice.
And you know what? I will give him this. He's 12 years old, we established. He's never had any interaction with crime. I think by the end of the episode, he learns that being an accomplice, or what he thinks an accomplice is not something that he's interested in being. So I do think there is a learn, even if it's for a definition that he doesn't quite understand.
Yeah, I would agree with you. But again, my issue is they don't call that out. And I mean, it's a half-hour show.
Yeah.
They address everything. But it's something to where they show how much fun and how excited Cory is to be an accomplice without ever really going back to the fact that when you do that, yeah, Cory feels bad and there are like half consequences in the fact that his, he had to lie to his family. But other than that, it just kind of shifts all the blame to Shawn.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, Cory is about to go downstairs, and Shawn's like, look, you are terrible at keeping up a brave face, so just do the best you can. And next scene,
we cut to Cory at dinner. He's grinning like a crazy person, throwing every extra piece of food on his plate, like piling up meatloaf and mashed potatoes.
Yeah, exactly. What I love about this is Alan's like, you're grounded for 2 weeks.
Yeah, why? Just because. I don't know why. I don't know what you did, but I know it's at least worth 2 weeks.
Exactly. And I like that. But so what's interesting here is, then this may be a little, I don't know, like we'll see. But Cory's like making excuses. He's like, look, I gotta run back into his room. He's just like it's just me up in my room by myself, but I gotta go. I'm a grown boy. And he like needs his alone time. And I'm just like, I would assume, like, is he touching himself? Like, is this like...
Well, no, he does make a point of saying, like, I have so much homework, because there's a big thump that happens on the floor, like when on the roof.
Yeah, but no one believes that. That's what I'm saying. Like Cory being like, I have so much homework to do.
Oh, you mean like, what do they think he's actually up to?
Exactly.
Like, what is he hiding? Oh, yeah. I would assume a drug addiction, based on his behavior alone, because, like I said, manic.
So after that, he goes back upstairs with the food, and Shawn's like, yo, no ketchup. I need my meatloaf. And Cory very rightfully points out, he's like, yo, let me just go ask Amy that the fugitive I'm hiding in my room wants ketchup with his meat brick.
One thing I will say is that when Cory comes back upstairs, Shawn is in his clothes.
Yeah.
And it's like comically short on Shawn. Like the jeans go to his like knees. It's just ridiculous.
I love it because it also points out, as we've been calling, the growth spurt in Ryder Strong. And
dude, shorts would have been fine. I'm sure Cory had basketball shorts. We saw them in 2 episodes ago.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. He chose like Cory. It was like a cliche.
His tightest clothes. Yeah, it was a full outfit. Jeans, a shirt, maybe a jacket. I don't remember. It was a whole thing.
Yeah, that's actually really funny. I'm glad you pointed that out. That's when Eric bursts into the room claiming to know what Cory's up to. Which again, if the boy was touching himself, this is about to be a very awkward moment. Because like there's no privacy in this house.
Well, we find out that Eric is, he's suspicious right away, but he thinks that Cory is hiding a puppy.
Yeah, because of the smell.
Yeah. Again, you've been talking about them making jokes about Shawn's smell, and here it is again.
Exactly.
Eric actually thinking a dog was in the room because Shawn was there.
Yeah. And then, but of course, when Eric came to the room, Shawn hides into the bathroom. And then that's when we learn, which I didn't notice before, but we learned that Morgan and the boys share a bathroom. Like, so she has her own room.
No. That's not, I don't think that's right. I think, because Cory says to Amy, why isn't she in her bathroom? And Amy's like, her door is locked to her bathroom, so we're gonna have a bathroom.
Yeah, but see, that's what Amy says is that her door is locked because she asked why she's coming. Cory asked why she's coming this way, why they're using, their interests, and she says,
"Oh, you think it's like a Jack and Jill where there's a door on both sides?"
Exactly, because other than that, like Morgan's door is locked, so we're gonna just use a different bathroom. That doesn't make sense. So
I guess that makes more sense, I guess.
And so
you're right. It's probably not as big of a house as it seems from the outside.
Exactly. But I was just like, it pointed out something that I was like, we're also kind of reminded that the Matthews is middle class, like, and they're not necessarily upper middle class either. Yeah. I just thought that was a cool reminder. So anyway,
I think the biggest mistake with the Matthews is the exterior shot of their home, because it implies that they are way better off than they actually are.
Well, actually, the 90s, you could just get a house for like being white and some Q-tips.
Man, what a beautiful decade that was. Take me back.
Yeah, right. Well, not you.
Well, actually, I take that back. I take that back right away.
Exactly. So Shawn climbs out of the bathroom window and into the bedroom window where Eric catches him. And of course, now that Eric feels like he has the upper hand, he asks the boys for bribes in order to.
Yeah, well, he says right away, he's like, I don't want to know anything because I don't want to have to lie when asked, which, by the way.
Great theory.
That, like, if ever you're in a situation where you sense trouble, that's the way to
Tell me nothing.
Tell me nothing. But he does say, I just want to get straight down to my bribe, which I thought was a funny pivot.
Which is also, it's just as bad if we're talking in terms of crime. But at least, you get something out of it. So
this is white boy logic, man. We talk about it.
Yeah, for sure. So in the next scene, this class is discussing Shawn's incident, and it seems like everyone's heard about it. Topanga thinks that it was like a political statement, which Minkus responds to like, what was it saying? Build more prisons? And I was like, man, Minkus is a Republican.
100% Minkus is a Republican. And well, I think this was when I watch documentaries and stuff about the 90s, there was this push to be tough on crime.
Exactly.
With Bush, with Reagan, I mean, not just with Clinton, but Clinton especially was just like, he was the one who put in 3 strikes. He was we're in this time where the prison industrial system is really like growing and booming in a way that we haven't seen yet.
So we're gonna pause right here and talk about that, which is to say that this is when like the whole tough on crime thing began. But the tough on crime movement is literally it was made to isolate the Black minority. It like almost everything was specifically targeted for inner city Black males.
CJ, why would people want Black men to go to jail? Why would that be a thing? Could it be that slavery never actually ended and it's just been hidden throughout, prisons?
And that racism is a prime part of our system, both politically, capitally, socially.
Our country realized after Civil War, no, we still need slaves to function, so we'll just put them in prisons and have them build things for Walmart.
God. I mean, and like, so it's really, because that whole tough on crime thing, which I didn't understand, is nothing but a dog whistle. The quote, tough on crime, or being tough on crime, or seeming like you're soft on crime is a way to kind of address white people's concern over growing minority populations. Because what they did, and what the tough on crime thing, as you said, I think it began with like Nixon or whatever, it was successful by driving home the image of a Black male as a criminal. They equated the two, and they wanted to make sure that all of America equated the two. So crime became this subtle way of saying Black people.
Oh no, yeah. If you can't call them slaves, you had to change the verbiage to make it socially acceptable.
Well, yeah, because as the book points out, you can, in this new America, quote unquote, we don't allow you to blatantly be racist. Well, we didn't. Now we don't even care. But we didn't allow you to be blatantly racist, but criminals were different. Everyone in America, like if you were a criminal, you were allowed to be considered different, and people
to have your rights actually taken away. Like,
exactly.
That's the thing with the 13th Amendment. It's like no more slaves unless they're criminals.
Exactly. So anyway, going back to this,
Minkus is a Republican, is where
Minkus is that is.
But I do want to say that I thought Topanga's comment was interesting, where she was like, you know what, I thought Shawn was doing a daring political statement, which again is obviously a bit naive, but Topanga always has like people's best interest at heart. Like, she always assumes that someone is doing something to be their true selves in a way, and I think that's a really beautiful way to see people.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that I like that you pointed that out, because we jumped straight into Minkus and his accusations, and it makes me Again, I love the fact that we know Minkus from his one season, and it shows how great Lee Norris was, because he stands out even in like a moment like this.
Well, totally. And what we're actually seeing, if you think about it, is we cut to this class after a major crime has happened, and we're seeing a liberal and a conservative talk about the crime.
Exactly.
I thought this was daring. Minkus is like, I think this was ridiculous and stupid. So
build more prisons.
Yeah. So it's interesting that like they're introducing us to these political ideas through these 12-year-olds. Yeah, it's cool.
Phenomenal. And then Cory, of course, defends Shawn while claiming not to know anything, but only later explaining that he knows way too much for someone who supposedly knows nothing.
No, they like, Minkus is like, he's like, oh, I know nothing about Shawn putting a cherry bomb in front of the supermarket
on
yesterday.
Yeah.
And Minkus is like, oh, he claims not to know where Shawn is, but he has all these details. And I'm like, well, just because he knows what happened doesn't mean he knew Shawn. Like, his dad works at that store. Like, other people could have been, I'm sure this was maybe on the news. Like, all Cory said was that he knows the location of what happened.
Yeah.
I don't think he says anything that really gives him away, other than his behavior.
Yeah, he's Cory, and everyone assumes as much. I mean, but at the exact same time, you're right. This is Minkus wanting, as we said, he's built this conservative overreaction to the crime.
You know who Minkus reminds me of? You know that in the movie Independence Day, that guy who's just like, President, you gotta put a bomb down. And like, it's just that person who's just like just really presumptuous, but like firm on law, not really caring like about like the heart that goes behind the people who are committing crimes. Like, he seems to he's gonna grow up and be that person based on what I'm getting from him here.
Exactly. At least at this point in time, Minkus is definitely he
doesn't have empathy. I mean, there's no empathy in Minkus, and I don't think there's ever been, because I feel like that's the reason why he's constantly giving Shawn a hard time, because if he was as smart as he claims to be, he would understand that Shawn grew up in a circumstance that was different than his, and didn't give him the same opportunities that Minkus had.
Yeah, and I agree, but as we've pointed out, he's a Republican, so that's when we find out that the class is reading The Telltale Heart, which, again, this is a very Boy Meets World.
So Boy Meets World. Of course, as soon as Feeney said that, I was like, of course they are. Of course,
exactly. That's what like, it happened. I was like, yep, that sounds about right. And, you know, Cory, of course, is really influenced by the reading because he feels guilt. So
he feels crippling guilt over this. And keep in mind, it's been like not even a full day.
Yeah. So, but checking back in at the house, in the next scene, we see Shawn trying to remain hidden.
Oh, I'm sorry. Before we move on, I do want to point out that Feeney tells the class that Shawn's parents came looking for him.
Yeah.
And I'm only pointing that out because I want to comment on it later.
No. Actually, I thank you for pointing that out, because I forgot to make note of it. But so Shawn's trying to remain hidden, and while Amy's cleaning, and so he's like under the bed and she's vacuuming, and this is like, it's played for comedy, but also at the exact same time, she says later, she's like, all right, so I'll leave you in this room all by yourself when Cory comes home, noting that she knows that Shawn's in the room. But, like, does that mean she was purposely hitting this dude on the head? Because you can hear him say, ow, over the vacuum.
And yeah, it seems that both Alan and Amy start having fun with Shawn, which I don't want to... I want to wait until get into this, but there's a huge issue I have as far as them implementing their parenting techniques on another person's kid.
Well, there's not only that, but also they're, like, abusing the boy. Like, if she knew he was under there, she's literally hitting him in the head. And then,
well, he's a criminal. You can treat criminals however you want.
But that's my whole point. It was just like it's played for comedy, even when Alan does it a little bit later. But it's like, you could have hurt this kid. Who, I get that you're like trying to point out that you know that he's there, but still,
Again, if he's a criminal, if he's wearing a hoodie, I mean, who knows? He could be guilty of something and deserve it.
Don't let there be Skittles under that bed. Sad.
We have to laugh at it, guys. We have to, because really, it's too heartbreaking otherwise.
Really sad. Yeah, would have been 23 this year, right?
Oh man, this is. Yeah.
That took a turn. So Alan comes in and because Cory's come home, of course, Amy points out that she noticed that his closet is now clean, and Cory makes a little excuse for that. And then Amy leaves him in his room by himself, quote unquote. And this is when Shawn's like, I was so bored, I cleaned your closet. You have like no video games worth playing. So it's just this fun little bit. Go ahead.
Well, there's also this point where Cory, you start to see Cory kind of change his position. Like, before he was so excited to be the accomplice, and now he's like, "Hey, Shawn, things are getting really out of hand. Like, your parents came to school looking for you. Like, are you sure you don't want to just like talk to my dad about it?" And Shawn's like, "No, I can't. We can't talk to anyone about it." It's interesting to see, like, already Cory is starting to realize that this isn't a role he wants to play.
Yeah, it's all fun and games when you sign up. That's when the reality.
And that's like, well, let's imagine if he was like a 13-year-old kid without a dad who joined the gang to get like family, and then decided midway through that he didn't want to be a part of a crime. When you've been jumped in, there's no Cory had the option to opt out. Yeah.
So anyway, Alan, and also he's not good at it because Alan comes in and Alan's just like, "Hey, Cory, how's your day?" Cory's immediately like, "Stop bugging me, I know nothing."
Dude, I wouldn't trust this kid with any information.
Not at all. And then Alan comes and he tells the story about the mailbox, and he says that he knows that Cory knows, and Cory's like, "Yo, I blame those postage stamps. They're highly flammable."
Well, what Alan says, well, yeah, that is a fucking joke.
Well, it goes back to Cory's ability to kind of explain his way out of stuff, even though like it's a stupid explanation. It's usually a clever explanation.
One thing that Alan says, he's like, I haven't had a very good day because I mailed like 12 bills today.
Yeah.
As you know, the mailbox blew up, which comes into play later on. Which I
have response to that too. But
totally.
And then that's when Alan tells a story about like this friend he had that used to be a troublemaker who got bored of.
He doesn't say a friend. He was like, I knew someone when I was younger.
True.
Yeah, he's very he's careful with his word choice there.
That's a very good point. And he's like, who got bored of the small stuff and moved on to bigger things. And I was just like, it's very, Alan comes off very judgmental. And he was like, and if Shawn was here, I would come down hard on him, and that's when he jumps on the bed, which is what I'm talking about. Like, he knows Shawn's under the bed, and he could possibly be injuring this kid. But I just was like, Alan, one of the issues that I have...
Does this bed not have a frame?
Right. One of the issues that I had is that almost throughout this episode, Shawn is dismissed as a lost cause. Everyone tries to talk to Cory about it.
I do disagree with that a little bit. I do feel that the reason why Alan is coming down a little bit harder on Shawn, like literally and just metaphorically, is because I think in somewhere in Alan, he feels like he relates to Shawn, and he feels like he needed tough love, and that's where he feels like
but that's not what happens. What he says is that what Shawn did was stupid, and again, that's like my whole thing is like if you are in fact trying to connect with this kid who you feel
you wouldn't say anything like that.
He's saying all these things knowing that Shawn can hear him, knowing that, and he is very judgmental of Shawn's actions without knowing the full story, which is that Shawn really didn't intend to do the mailbox.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he does
Well,
it.
I mean, they don't have those details either. I mean, they maybe don't know the questions to ask to get the full story.
And I'm not saying that they do. What I'm saying is, if Shawn is who they think he is, they are making no attempts to connect with Shawn. As 100%. A matter of fact, everyone kind of leaves it up to Cory to deal with Shawn. They all tend to Cory. They don't go, like, even we point out the fact a little later, which we'll get to, that they know that he's here because Feeney saw him climb into the window. And no one tries to reach Shawn. They all put it up upon Cory's shoulders to do that.
Well, I will say this. I think there was this fear, because I questioned this too, of why aren't they, if apparently they knew right away that Shawn was there.
Yeah.
So even though, like, Shawn's parents came to school looking for him, like, the parents knew he was there, Feeney knew he was there. I think there was this fear that if they tried to approach Shawn, that he would run away, because that honestly seems like what would most likely happen. So I think I don't think they were trying to dismiss Shawn. I think they were like, hey, we don't have a way of connecting with him because he's closed himself off to everyone but you. So as your friend, we're hoping that you make the right choices, even though that's a hell of a thing to put on a kid.
That's what I'm saying. All I'm saying is, even if that's the case, these are irresponsible adults.
Yeah, and that was my point of just like...
Cory.
Yeah, and that was my point of these, like, they have this, Feeney and the Matthews seem to have this really hands-off approach to teaching kids, but, like, you're making that call for Shawn's parents, who maybe wouldn't have responded that way, and that's not really fair to them.
It's implied that they spoke to him, because, like, in the next scene, I'm so sorry we're jumping all over the place, but it's in the next scene we hear the Matthews talk about how they, of course, immediately told Shawn's family, and that kind of means that, you know, they
so there was like a little understanding between the two parents.
Exactly.
The parents.
Okay. But at the exact same time, it's something to where it's not necessarily that they allow the boys to discover these things and work through it on their own. If that was it, I would be like, all right, cool. What they do is, again, both of them, knowing that Shawn is in the room, speak to Cory about Cory's responsibility to help Shawn stay on the good side.
Well, I will say this about that, is that right before Alan leaves, he's like, hey, I want you to know this, that, like, there is nothing worse than not coming home. Like, I don't care what you do, how bad it is, you can always come home. That's the worst thing you can do. And I do think that Alan was speaking to Shawn, even though he came down hard on him and he was like, hey, what Shawn did was stupid. I'm letting both of you know that the worst thing you can do is not come home.
Exactly. But as Cory points out, because Cory tries to reason with Shawn and is like, did you hear that? But as Cory points out, Alan kind of gave mixed messages. He was very judgmental. He, quote unquote, reprimands Shawn by jumping on the bed and all this other stuff. And then he tries to give him a lesson. It's one of those things where it's like you can't judge someone and then turn around and give them advice.
Yeah, you can't push them away and then try to build a connection.
Exactly.
It's just, yeah.
And that's what, like, Shawn even comes out of the bed and he's like, well, I blacked out during some of it. Meaning, you know, it's just like, well, I wanted to listen, but I couldn't because I was too busy feeling the consequences, which is part of the problem with crime. It's like, you want to punish someone for doing something that, you know, maybe they meant to do it, maybe they didn't, maybe, you know, things got out of control no matter what, but you are punishing them first, and then after you punish them, you're like, why can't you see the error of your ways?
Well, I don't know if you know how we treat criminals in this society, but we punish first.
Yes.
And then maybe we'll get to the reasoning, like the emotional stuff behind it, if you're lucky.
Exactly. And this was a very good example of that. But it also, you know, Cory and Shawn are just kind of on different sides of this at the point. And Cory, of course, is relying on his family's history of love. And he's like, yo, look, we should listen, go get get my dad. And he tries to go get Alan, but when he does, Shawn just jumps out of,
what Shawn says to Cory right before Cory calls Alan in, and he's like, hey, we've always been on this side of the line. I am now on this other side of the line, and there's no coming back. And that's this whole topic of the line that we talked about earlier. And what is it to be on one side of the line versus others? And I think in this context, they're just referring to like goofing off in class versus actually breaking a law. But Shawn committed a federal offense by destroying a mailbox. This is not like this is a way bigger deal than even they realize, I think. And I don't understand how Shawn gets away with it, honestly.
Well, to be fair, I think that what you just said is kind of part of the issue. I understand completely how he got away with it, which is one, being white, and two, it's I feel that in reality there's a difference between blowing up a mailbox for an actual political statement and blowing up a mailbox because
you didn't, there wasn't a trash can around.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what we need and what most likely happened was there was a sympathetic judge or a sympathetic.
Yeah, we gloss over the court date because there was a court date.
But like, it's one of those things to where that is how he is able to quote unquote get away with it. But I mean, in a way, did he get away with it? Because one of the things that the book points out is how once someone's labeled a criminal, that's how we see them, and that's
very true.
That's pretty much how this episode goes. From this moment on, Shawn's the troublemaking bad boy.
And one of the other things I thought was really interesting was Cory's insisting. He's like, you know what, my dad will fix everything. It's this whole father knows best mindset. And we see the important role in this episode that the father plays in teaching a boy morality.
Yes.
So without that guidance, we're to believe, and like in Shawn's case, that without that guidance, you could very easily stray and go into the way of crime. So if you're growing up, and let's say, for example, like maybe your father's in prison for selling a small amount of marijuana, or maybe he was affiliated with like a Black Panthers party and just got thrown in jail for no reason. You would be growing up without that guidance and without that morality. So who's actually at fault? Is it the kid who never had anyone tell them what was better, or is it, you know, I don't know. I get what you're saying.
I get what you're saying. You're actually trying to reach to like a bigger issue, and I think it does point out, or you do point out a very valuable thing, which is that if we're going to do this father knows best, Alan is not Shawn's father. So if Shawn,
I guess what I was trying to say was that if father knows best, and like and kids are supposed to learn this morality for their fathers, what happens to the boys who don't have fathers, are fathers that play important roles in their life, like it seems Shawn's does? You know, like where are they supposed to learn?
I agree with you, but what I was saying is what happens when you don't have a father who speaks like Alan? You know what I mean? And it's just or thinks like Alan. And it's not to say that Shawn's father doesn't, because we honestly don't know how they handle this situation. We aren't given that viewpoint. But
well, if we assume that they're like on board with this whole like the Matthews have him at their house and they're gonna make sure he's okay, like they must seem like their techniques. And we later are introduced to their parents, Shawn's parents, and they're actually very nice people. But
yeah, we love them.
But I don't think that they would have done something so different. Like Shawn makes it seem like he's going to get like murdered by his dad, but I don't.
But see, I think that that's also, I mean, we're getting into different things, but I feel like that's just how kids are. I think there are so many times where since we are so focused on punishment for being bad in this country, instead of really, again, there's like this whole talk of the line, instead of realizing that, no, people make mistakes, people do things, they don't think all the way through, and maybe we should focus on that. Instead, we're like, did you do a good thing or did you do a bad thing? And if you did a bad thing, then you'll get punished. And when you do that, when you raise someone to believe that way, then that's when they're like, oh, I did a bad thing, there's no coming back from it. And that's ridiculous. That's
and it's that concept of, well, I already crossed the line, so I might as well keep crossing it since there's no coming back.
Exactly. And let's just get to the next scene because it talks a lot about this. This is when
look at Boy Meets World having us have this conversation in 2018. What?
Exactly. Cory confesses that he was hiding Shawn, which the family said they already knew. A, because he's a bad liar, and then B, because Fee saw Shawn climb through the window. And then that's when Cory makes, I only noted this because Cory makes a note about the International Kid Hotline. If a kid makes a move, every parent picks up the phone. And that reminded me of our Pete and Pete discussion.
The flashlight episode of Pete and Pete. The flashlight tag is the one where they stay up all night, right?
Yeah, exactly. It reminded me of that. So anyway, Alan says he knows Cory likes Shawn, and this is again where the judgment comes. He's like, he's been your best friend since he helped you pick the lock on your playpen.
Well, I'm so sorry but we glossed over one quick thing, which was Morgan has one line in this episode, basically, which like Cory's like, oh, it could have been a puppy when he was trying to convince them that like Shawn wasn't maybe up there, and Morgan looks at Cory and
nobody's
goes,
that naive.
Cory, no one is that naive.
Well, what they do is immediately. Eric's like, hey, I think the puppy thing could have worked, which is
I happen to like the puppy theory, and then they both just vanished.
Yeah, they just leave.
Morgan. No one asked them to leave. Eric's cooking food on the stove and just walks away.
But I want to get back to, again, how we deal with this is Alan says that the way he's talking, even Cory's like, you think he's a criminal, which that's a very big thing. He's like, no, I feel like he's rough, but as is shown, Alan's coming off as very judgmental of Shawn as a.
You know what? I didn't read that though. I did not read it as judgmental. I read it as
like I said, Cory's response is, you think he's a criminal, so it may not be what is intended, but Alan is coming off as someone who thinks that Shawn is a criminal, even if he doesn't think that way.
To me, he came across more like Lawrence Fishburne and Boys in the Hood, where he's like, no, like, you brothers need to wake up because this is what life is. Like, that's the vibe I got from Alan.
And I didn't get that at all. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I understand that. And if anything, again, cutting ahead, Feeney is the closest to that, if you ask me. Alan is Alan.
Well, in the story that Alan ends up saying is just like, I actually used to be like Shawn, and I had, a bunch of trouble that I got into, and if I didn't have a friend to help me out of it, like, he's trying to say, like, the reason why I feel this way about Shawn is because I can personally relate to someone with that mindset, and that's where I was able to gain sympathy for Alan.
Well, see, and that's what I will say, that I think that when you are looking at the whole package, which I get, I feel that you are giving Alan this pass because you know that Alan, in truth, sympathizes and has a lot in common with Shawn. But
you're speaking to the bigger issue of punishment and labeling, which I do agree is a very big issue.
Exactly.
Once you have that label, you can't erase that label, and that's almost the worst kind of punishment.
Exactly. And I'm saying that Alan, even with the way that he went about it, Alan is doing what we talked about of pushing Shawn and pushing even Cory to question his friendship with Shawn. But at the exact same time, he'll turn around immediately and be like, but you're a good influence on Shawn.
There's always been this, we'll know as the show goes on, that Alan does have this almost hypocritical notion of Shawn, where he's, at one point, he's like, I relate to Shawn, he almost like is a second father to Shawn, and then there's other times where he comes up to Cory and he's like, I don't think you need to be hanging out with him anymore. So it's just like, which is it, Alan?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I'm saying. It's conflicting, and I just want.
Well, maybe I feel like maybe that's just what it is to be a parent that has a kid that has a friend that sometimes gets into trouble, and you're like, no, I love that kid, but I do worry about the influence he has over mine. Maybe that's just a very like natural.
And I will say that I do not have kids, and I don't know the proper way of going about these things. So I hear you on that.
One of the things that's really interesting is Alan says, like, I was Shawn and I got into trouble, but I was really glad because I had a friend like you, my friend Richie, and he was the one who told me that my ideas were dumb and I needed to basically come back on the right side of the line. My note on this was just that his friend's name is Richie. The reason why his friend's name is Richie is because Michael Jacobs was obsessed with Happy Days, and so of course the good kid was Richie, like Cunningham, basically. Who was able to help Alan out of his tough time.
That's really good. I love that. I'm actually really glad you included that note.
Oh, man.
So, in our next scene, to kind of figure out where Shawn is, we are in the classroom, which immediately lets us know that that's where Shawn is hiding. Feeny comes into the classroom after hours, claiming that he left something, but you honestly know that he knows where Shawn is.
Apparently, anyone can get into the school over the weekend after hours.
Right, exactly. Middle class America.
Yeah.
And Shawn, of course, when Feeny calls him out, assumes that Cory told him. But this is where Feeny is like, no, Cory has stayed a true friend. He's good. It's you who have really betrayed the friendship. And then Shawn does this thing where he says that the last thing he's worried about is his and Cory's friendship, it shows the weight that this relationship has for Shawn, which we will get into, and it's always a thing that we come back to, and I really appreciate this acknowledgement. But it's also really interesting, and I think it's a greater, bigger picture concept for Feeny. Again, we've spent a lot of this time talking about Cory, and everyone focusing on Cory as usual, but Feeny points out Shawn's flaw, and it's not the breaking the law. That's not what he gets after Shawn on. It's how he's tested this friendship that he knows is valuable.
And I think of anything that, if there's any actual lesson that in 2018 I would want a kid to take away, it's this concept of friendship. And one of the big the things, because we're talking about criminality here.
Yeah.
And at least I know that, I don't know, maybe in other cultures, but especially in Black culture, there is this notion of a snitch.
Snitches get stitches.
And you have, like, people serving years in prison simply because they didn't want to rat on their friends.
Yeah.
But more than that, there's the people who allowed their friends to take the rap for them. And, like, just how shitty to go your whole life knowing that someone else is suffering because you refuse to own up into your own mistakes and take your own accountability. And I think that's what both Feeny and Cory are trying to teach Shawn within this classroom scene is, you have to take accountability because you're making the people around you suffer by this, specifically your so-called friend, where you were allowing him to get wrapped up into this whole, like, he's stressed, he's not eating, like he's manic, like Cory's falling apart and Shawn doesn't even seem to care. And that's one of the things that Feeny is hinting on here. It's like, hey, like, you can test this friendship, but this could very easily tear to the point where you can't repair it.
I don't think that Shawn doesn't care. I think that Shawn can't see it, and I think that's
sure. Yeah, that's the best way to say it. Yeah,
I think that that's an important distinction.
Right before Feeny leaves, he gives Shawn this monologue about this canvas that he forgot, and he talks about it in the terms of Cory and Shawn's friendship.
Mr. Matthews has been a true and loyal ally. If anybody has betrayed this friendship, it was you. The moment you asked him to lie.
I would have done the same for him. But, Mr. Feeny, about the only thing I'm not worried about in my life right now is Cory and mine friendship.
Oh, here we go. I knew it was here somewhere. In my eagerness to depart for the weekend, I forgot to take it home.
What is it?
Canvas. I often paint on the weekends. Very strong material. Difficult to rip. Give it a try. Go on. Of course, rugged as it is, even the smallest snip. And you see, Mr. Hunter, once the integrity has been breached, even the strongest fabric can unravel. Even the strongest friendship.
So what I think is really cool about this analogy is this. To me, this is classic Feeney. Like, as soon as
this is what Feeney taught me is all about. It's
100%.
That Feeney is able to build an analogy off of something. I immediately was like, this is a Feeney taught me moment. It's like it's not even by the fence. It's just a great lesson that he's able to teach by actually like not trying to teach it, at least in a way to where the person doesn't feel like they were taught a lesson.
And I think Feeney's understand, this is what makes him just such an amazing educator, is that he understands that giving someone the answer isn't as important as them arriving at the answer themselves.
Exactly.
So Feeney doesn't actually like say what you should or should not do. He simply asks these questions in such a way that it forces you to come to the answer that he hopes that you're going to come to. And it's him using parables and analogies when talking to the kids is just really a reflection of his overall teaching technique, which is that, you know, I'm not going to say what you should or should not do. You need to figure this out.
Exactly. And to me, this is like the true lesson of the episode, as you said, that I would definitely want more people to learn, which is that, canvas is strong, but the smallest tear and it unravels. And the same can happen with friendship. You know, it doesn't seem like a lot, or any relationship, but it doesn't seem like a lot if you ding it or if you do all this other stuff. But that does work.
And I think what Feeney's doing is that he's making Shawn like, hey, I know you're really concerned about getting in trouble with your parents and things like that, but you just need to understand that there's other things going on. And, Shawn being 12 isn't thinking about the large picture the way that Feeney
What
is.
I think is it points out, even the scene, to Shawn, the thing that he can always rely on is Cory. And Feeney points out that if that's the case, then you are already damaging the thing that you care the most about.
Yeah, like you don't even realize like how big of a like foundation that is in your life. And so if you start making cracks in it, like you don't, that's the bigger thing you need to worry about. And what an amazing thing like for us to talk about. Because think about this, like we're 30, like we're busy working, we get stressed and stuff, we're dealing with our own personal things all the time. And how often do we like are a little shady to our friends when we're like just busy, are stressed, are freaking out about work or anything like that?
I literally had to learn this lesson myself with my best friend a few months ago, and I had to learn. Oh shit! I was the one who actually did things wrong. Like I felt some kind of way about it, but I was like, oh yeah, I was the one who made that tear. I was the one who started it, and yeah, I had to repair it. But it's a great lesson, as you said, to learn as a 30-year-old, let alone a 12-year-old.
Yeah, because you get so caught up in particulars that you fail to understand that like the reason why you work, the reason why you care so much about all these things is because you want a better quality of life for you and the people you love. And as soon as you forget that, it's easy to just take those people for granted and in a way almost make that stress a reason to negatively affect your relationship with those people. So I thought that was a really cool lesson for us to take away from this episode.
All right. And then, so off of there, as you said, Feeney doesn't even stick around and like try to convince Shawn to do anything. He just is like, yo, I said what I had to say and I'm out.
Well, Shawn's like, aren't you going to turn me in? And he goes, Feeney says, I don't think I have to. And then just walks out. And I was like, yo, Feeney, that's kind of cool. Well, as he walks out, Cory enters.
Yeah, and I love it. He points out, he's like, all week long, y'all are trying to get out of this classroom. And here you are after hours.
Well, and Feeney basically said, like, I was in such a hurry to leave for the weekend that I forgot this canvas. So, it is like a Saturday at like, I imagine like 11 or 10, like at night. Like, why, again, do they have access to this school to just come in and out? Shawn brought a sleeping bag in. No one stopped him.
Yeah. So Cory comes in, as we had pointed out, and he is trying to convince Shawn to come home. And he has like this really big speech about, as you were saying, accountability. But then also, much to the discussion of this relationship and the foundation that they have, Cory is also like, look, I'm here for you.
Well, yeah, look, Cory comes in and he immediately throws an empty book bag at Shawn, and Shawn opens it up to like see like food or supplies. There's nothing in it, which I thought was cold as ice. And then Shawn's like, "Can I have any money?" And Cory's like, "Well, I don't have any." And he's like, "Can I borrow your bike?" He's like, "Actually, I got a ride here from your parents." Shawn starts freaking out and he tries to leave, and Cory just stands in front of him and he's like, "No." And then Shawn's like, "Get out of my way." Cory's like, "No, I'm not going to. Beat me up if you have to. I'm staying." And this, I thought, was such an amazing moment for their friendship. Like in terms of just the history of the show, where Cory's like, "Bro, you can hit me, you can do whatever you want. I love you. I'm here for you, and I'm here because I want what's best for you. And like I don't care if you're mad at me as long as you do what's best for you." Like that is such like a telling thing about their dynamic going forward in the series.
No, I mean it is, and I think it's as you said, it's not said directly, but this is an example of love. This is where bromance, began. There's this willingness of Cory to literally lay his life or his well-being on the line for Shawn several times in this episode, and he, challenges Shawn to consider it. He basically says that you're not going to sacrifice us over your own decisions, and I'm secure in knowing that. And I think that that's a great thing for anyone to have.
Well, and I think it's just really interesting too how I don't think Shawn has a lot of people in his life that show him unconditional love, which is why I think he is so like afraid of going home. I think that when you really look at like the psychology behind a kid not wanting to go and face his parents is because he understands he's fearful not just that he'll get in trouble, but that relationship will suffer. And so when you have
we already know they cut off his sister.
Yeah, exactly. So like I think when Cory's there and he's like, no, I mean basically showing Shawn unconditional love in a way that's not just outright, I think that's mostly what's able to convince Shawn is like, you know what, like this is what I needed. I needed someone just to say like, I'm going to be with you whether it's good or it's bad. Like it probably will be bad, but that's fine because I'm with you.
Exactly, because like again, what Shawn says is I'm going to be grounded for a month, and Cory's like, all right, well then see you in a month. And
yeah, it's not a big deal. Like you'll get in trouble, but like I mean, they're downplaying the amount of trouble that he really should get into. But just speaking as far as the show goes, it's this thing of like, hey, you're gonna mess up sometimes, I'm gonna mess up sometimes, but as long as we got each other's backs, like we're good. Yeah. We're boys.
Exactly. Oh God, it's so good. And that's the end of the formal episode. But then we get this epilogue, which is it's fun because it's been a month as we see. And
so that's when we find out that Shawn is basically his punishment, as far as we know as an audience, was he was grounded for a month.
Yep.
there was no legal ramifications. He didn't have to it was just between him and his parents that had to work this out.
Again, I think that this is one of those things where it's like that's what we are told of. I'm sure his parents are paying off the city in some way, but they probably just didn't put that on their son.
I really wish that if they and this is what one of my things about the one of the past episodes is that like they're setting wrong expectations as far as reality. Yeah. The expectation that's set that like if a kid watching this were to throw a cherry bomb in the mailbox, the repercussions would be so much bigger than a month grounded. And maybe I'm nitpicking a little too much, but I felt that there was a point here where they could have really made a point where Shawn's like, yeah, I'm having to do community service, but it's okay. Like I'm pushing through it, like something like that.
Yeah, honestly, I was like wondering, I was like, what do you want from the to say on this kid show? But I think you're right. Community service or something like that showed that there was some process would have been welcomed.
Yeah, just something. But it is interesting that it doesn't seem that Cory has seen Shawn in a month. So Shawn wasn't in school? Did he get suspended for a month? Like, this wasn't a school-related incident, so I don't understand how it affects him being at school. Yeah. Why haven't they seen each other? Was Shawn sent away for like a month?
Or maybe it was just in fact that it was like, you know, you go to class. It was one of those black things. You go to class, you come home.
Yeah, I know that. I know that.
And so that's what I think. It's like they just had no downtime, and that made it feel. I mean, especially if you are close to someone as they are, not having any moment outside of like work or something does feel like a long time.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm sure there's not they don't have recess. I don't imagine, right?
No, they don't. So we get this little bit about everyone, of course, is on some form of technology, and it's just played up so big that you know the power is about to go out. And when it does, we find out it's because they're like, oh, so I want to make this note. Amy goes, Alan, didn't you pay the electric bill? He's like, yeah, a month ago, I put it in the mailbox. And then that's when everyone's like, oh, on Cherry Bomb Day. And Shawn's like, I'm out. But what is interesting to me about this is Con Ed does not cut off your electricity.
Yeah, that's immediately what I wrote down. I was like, that's not what happens when you miss a bill. You get a notice sent to you. Also, if a mailbox blew up and Alan knew that the mailbox blew up, he didn't have time to write another check?
Yeah.
What's up, Alan?
What I'm saying is, we've talked about this. They are middle class, but we also know they're struggling. So Con Ed does not cut off your bill immediately, but they do if this, as you said, is your third warning. So what I think is they were behind, and I think, again, we're learning more and more about the
No, I think they did it for the joke. I don't think this had anything to do. They did it for the joke, but more so than that, I think Alan is a responsible enough person to know, like, hey, the bills that got destroyed probably need to be replaced.
Well, no, I know in reality this was just for the joke, but I'm also saying that, again, we've talked about this numerous times about the discount cereal and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Really stretching their budget, so it would not be outside of thinking that they're actually behind their own bills.
I would think of anything like, I would use the mailbox thing to like get out of my bills for a month.
That's what I'm saying. That Alan was like, oh yeah, I sent the check. You know what I mean? They ain't gonna turn it.
Oh man, I sent the check.
All right, so Feeney taught me.
I think that the lessons were really abundant. It was, you can always go home if you're in trouble, and you don't want to sever a friendship when you're stressed about anything else.
I would agree. I think, of course, the latter one is the one that I think is done best. But I think you should always go home no matter what. Because the worst, it's only worse by not owning up to your mistakes is
sure. And I think for because we don't have kids, that fear of like your kid not coming home, you can that you'll be able to help your kid out as long as they're there for you to help. So this whole idea of we don't want Shawn running away to affect Cory, thinking that one day he can run away. There was I imagine that just being such a touchy subject for parents of their kids missing.
Yeah.
So I feel like even though this lesson maybe wasn't as well done, for a parent or for that kind of relationship, it's the more important lesson to learn for them versus for us who maybe don't have kids. The more important lesson was about the friendship.
No, you know what? I'll give you that. I have thoughts, but all right. What grade are you giving it?
I think this was it's a significant episode. It's such an important episode, even though there's parts of it that don't age well.
What grade are you giving this?
I'm giving this like an A-. I was going to say,
if this isn't an A episode, I literally waited because I was like, if you don't consider this an A episode, I think your whole scale is off.
No. I think this is for sure like an A episode, but I give it the minus just because there are things about it that don't age well. But just as far as just like learning about Shawn's character, setting him up for the rest of the series, the friendship that's displayed between the two boys that we haven't seen yet, really to this extent, I think that these are the most important things, and that's what makes this episode almost like one of the most important of this season, I think. Right up there with like the Topanga episode. And you know, it's one of those things where we're learning some vital information about a central character that's going to be around for the next 7 years. So A minus.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Cool. So those are our grades. You guys will let us know what you think. Thank you again for listening. This is Boy Meets World. Make sure to follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Boy Meets World, or email us at boymeetsworld@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter at Extra Ceej. That's XTRACEEJ. TC.
Braver Me, Instagram.
Thank you guys so much for joining us for this episode. We will see you next time. Remember to dream, try, and do good. Later, bros. Bye.
Later, bruh.